Welcome back to Dark Revenge Chronicles. Today's story is a dangerous journey of passion, betrayal, and vengeance. This is Vendetta's heart, where revenge meets romance, and the line between love and hate becomes dangerously blurred. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more dark romance stories. Hashtag dark romance, hashtag Mafia romance, hashtag revenge romance. Now, let's begin. 5 years ago, Marco Valentino had everything. At 28, he was the rising star of the Valentino crime family, next in line to lead one of the most powerful organizations on the East Coast. He had wealth, power, respect, and the love of a woman who made him believe in something beyond the violence that had defined his life. Her name was Aria Romano. Beautiful, intelligent, with eyes the color of honey and a smile that could make him forget he was a monster. She worked at a small art gallery in the city, completely removed from his world of crime and bloodshed. To her, he was just Marco, a businessman with family connections, not the heir to a criminal empire. He'd kept his true identity from her, wanting to protect her innocence, to have one pure thing in his corrupted life. For 6 months, they built something real. He'd sneak away from family obligations to spend evenings at her tiny apartment, talking about art and dreams and futures that didn't involve bullets and betrayal. He was going to tell her the truth. He'd planned it all out. He'd take her to dinner at their favorite restaurant, confess everything, and pray she'd understand. Pray she'd choose him anyway, but he never got the chance. The night before he planned to tell her, Marco walked into his father's office for what should have been a routine meeting. Instead, he found carnage. His father, Vittorio Valentino, lay dead behind his desk, 3 bullets to the chest. His uncle, his father's most trusted advisor, was slumped in the corner, throat slit. 2 guards were dead in the hallway, and on his father's desk, written in blood, was a message. The Romanos send their regards. The Romano family. Aria's family. Marco's world shattered in that moment. The investigation moved quickly, too quickly. His men found evidence everywhere. Communications between Aria and known Romano soldiers. Bank transfers to her account from Romano businesses. Security footage of her meeting with Lorenzo Romano, the family patriarch, just days before the hit. She'd been a plant. A spy. Everything between them had been a lie designed to get close to him, to learn the family's secrets, to set up the assassination that would cripple the Valentino organization. When Marco's men brought her in, dragging her from her apartment at 3 a.m, she didn't even try to deny it. She looked at him with those honey-colored eyes and said 5 words that destroyed what was left of his soul. I was doing my job. No remorse. No apology. Just cold calculation. The woman he'd loved, the woman he'd been ready to leave his family for, had never existed. She was a Romano operative, and he'd been her mark. Marco had let her go that night. Not out of mercy, but because killing her quickly would have been too kind. He looked into her eyes and made a promise. You and your family took everything from me. I'm going to return the favor. And when I'm done destroying everyone you love, when you're alone in the world with nothing left, I'm coming back for you. And you're going to beg me for death long before I grant it? Then he'd walked away, leaving her alive with the knowledge that her betrayal had unleashed something dark and terrible. That was 5 years. 5 years that Marco spent building himself into something more dangerous than his father had ever been. He took control of the Valentino family with an iron fist, eliminating anyone who questioned his leadership. He expanded their operations, made strategic alliances, and became the most feared man in the criminal underworld. But more importantly, he spent 5 years systematically destroying the Romano family. He started with their businesses. One by one, their legitimate fronts collapsed. Restaurants burned down, construction contracts fell through, shipping routes were compromised. He moved on to their soldiers, turning them against each other, sowing discord and paranoia. He exposed their illegal operations to law enforcement, sending dozens of Romano men to prison. Lorenzo Romano, Aria's grandfather and the family patriarch, died of a heart attack 2 years into Marco's campaign of destruction. Some said it was the stress of watching his empire crumble. Marco knew better. He'd made sure Lorenzo knew exactly who was destroying everything he'd built before the poison he'd had administered did its work. Aria's father went next. A car accident that wasn't an accident. Then her uncle, found dead in what police ruled a suicide. Her cousins either dead or in hiding. The Romano family, once a powerhouse that rivaled the Valentinos, was now a shadow of its former self. And through it all, Marco made sure Aria knew. Every business that failed, every family member who fell, he sent her a message. A black rose delivered to wherever she was hiding. No words necessary. She knew who was responsible. He'd tracked her movements over the years. After that night, she'd disappeared, but Marco had resources that could find anyone. She'd changed her name, moved to different cities, tried to become invisible. But you couldn't hide from a vendetta. You couldn't outrun revenge when the man pursuing you had unlimited resources and nothing left to lose. Now, 5 years later, Marco stood in his penthouse overlooking the city, holding the latest report from his men. They'd found her. She was living in a small coastal town 3 hours north, working as a waitress under the name Sophia Grant, trying to live a quiet, anonymous life. The Romano family was nearly extinct. Just a few scattered survivors with no power, no money, no influence. Everything they'd built over 3 generations was ash and memory. It was time to collect the final piece of his revenge. It was time to go get Aria. The diner where Aria worked was called Rosie's, a small roadside establishment that catered to truckers and locals. It was the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. The perfect place to disappear. Marco watched her through the window for a week before making his move. He wanted to see what her life had become, wanted to understand what she'd built from the ashes of her family's destruction. She looked different. Her honey-colored hair was shorter now, darker, dyed a mousy brown. She wore no makeup, dressed in worn jeans and simple shirts. The polished, sophisticated woman he'd known was gone, replaced by someone trying desperately to be ordinary. But he could still see glimpses of the Aria he'd known. The way she moved with unconscious grace. The smile she gave customers, dimmer now but still there. She was alive, functioning, surviving. That would change soon. He walked into the diner on a Tuesday morning, taking a booth in her section. She approached with her order pad, her customer service smile in place, not looking at his face. "What can I get you?" "Coffee, black. And the truth about why you did it." Her head snapped up, the pad falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. The color drained from her face as she stared at him. For a moment, she looked like she might run. But where would she go? He owned this town now just like he owned everything else. "Marco," she whispered, his name a ghost of sound. "Hello, Aria. Or should I call you Sophia? Tell me, how long did you think you could hide?" She looked around the diner desperately, but it was empty except for one cook in the back who was on Marco's payroll. The other waitress had been given the day off. "They were alone, please," she said quietly. "I know you're going to kill me. Just do it quickly." "Kill you?" Marco smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh no, Piccola. Death would be mercy, and I'm fresh out of mercy. You took 5 years from me. I'm going to take the rest of your life." 2 of his men entered the diner, and Aria backed away, bumping into the booth. Marco stood slowly, deliberately, watching the fear bloom in her eyes. Good. She should be afraid. "You have a choice," he said calmly. "You can come quietly, or my men can drag you out. Either way, you're leaving with me. But I'd prefer not to make a scene. These people here, they don't need to see what I'm capable of." Aria's hands were shaking. "Where are you taking me?" "Home, to my estate. Where you're going to stay for a very long time." He moved closer, until they were inches apart, and lowered his voice. 5 years ago, you destroyed my life for your family. Now your family is gone, and you're going to spend however long I decide paying for what you did. Your suffering has only just begun." She looked into his eyes, and what she saw there made her sway on her feet. This wasn't the Marco she'd known. The man who'd been kind and gentle, who'd held her like she was precious. This was someone else entirely. Someone cold and cruel and absolutely merciless. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." It's worth nothing. Your apologies mean nothing. Your remorse means nothing. The only thing that matters now is that you're mine, and I'm going to make you wish you'd died with the rest of your family." He grabbed her wrist, his grip iron hard, and pulled her toward the door. She didn't resist. What was the point? They both knew there was no escape. The drive to his estate was silent except for the sound of her quiet breathing and the occasional sob she tried to muffle. Marco didn't look at her, didn't speak. He'd waited 5 years for this moment. He could wait a few more hours. His estate was a fortress. High walls, armed guards, security systems that would make a prison jealous. He'd built it specifically for this purpose. A beautiful cage for a bird who'd once flown free. He led her through the mansion to the east wing, to a suite of rooms he'd prepared. Bedroom, bathroom, small sitting area, luxuriously appointed but modified. Windows that didn't open, a door that locked from the outside. Cameras in every corner. "This is where you'll stay," he said, finally releasing her wrist. "The door will be locked at all times. You'll be brought meals 3 times a day. You have books, a television, whatever you need to pass the time. But you don't leave this room without my permission." Aria turned to face him, and he saw tears streaming down her face. "How long?" "As long as I want. Maybe forever. I haven't decided yet." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Your family took everything from me. My father, my innocence, my ability to trust. You personally destroyed my heart. So I'm going to keep you here, alive but captive until I feel like we're even, which might be never. Marco, please, don't." His voice was sharp as a blade. "Don't beg. Don't plead. Don't say my name like we meant something to each other. You were acting. It was all an act. So save your performance. I'm not the fool I was 5 years ago." He left, locking the door behind him, and stood in the hallway for a long moment, listening to her breakdown on the other side. He'd imagined this moment countless times, imagined how satisfied he'd feel finally having her in his power. So why did he feel so empty? The first week, Aria didn't eat. The meals Marco's staff brought her sat untouched until they were taken away and replaced with new ones. She barely drank water. She spent most of her time curled up on the bed, staring at nothing. Marco watched her through the cameras. He told himself he was monitoring his prisoner, making sure she didn't try anything stupid. But really, he just watched her suffer, waiting to feel the satisfaction he'd craved for 5 years. It never came. On the 8th day, Maria, his head of household, confronted him in his study. "She's going to die if she keeps this up. She's lost weight. She's dehydrated. Whatever you're doing to her, it's killing her." "That's her choice," Marco said coldly. "Is it? Or is she just someone who's given up because she knows there's no hope?" Maria had worked for his family for 30 years. She was one of the few people who could speak to him frankly. "I don't know what she did to you, Marco, but watching someone slowly destroy themselves through neglect isn't revenge. It's just sad." After Maria left, Marco went to Aria's room for the first time since he'd locked her in. She was sitting in the window seat staring out at the gardens she couldn't reach, and she didn't turn when he entered. "You need to eat," he said. "Why? So I can stay healthy while you torture me? I'd rather starve." "I'm not torturing you," she laughed, a hollow sound. "Aren't you? This room is a beautiful cage, Marco, but it's still a cage. And you're keeping me here to punish me for something I can't undo. You destroyed my life." "I know." She finally turned to look at him, and he was shocked by how fragile she looked. "I destroyed your life and you destroyed mine. You killed my entire family. My grandfather, my father, my uncle, my cousins. Everyone I loved is dead because of you. So we're even, aren't we? Can't you just kill me now and end this?" "No." He moved closer, angry in a way he didn't understand. "We're not even. Your family killed my father. You helped them do it. You lied to me. You used me. You made me fall in love with you knowing it was all fake." "It wasn't all fake," she whispered. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying." She stood suddenly, facing him with a fire he hadn't seen in her eyes for years. "Yes, I was sent to spy on you. Yes, I was supposed to get close to you, learn your family's secrets. But everything that happened between us, what we felt, that wasn't part of the plan. I fell in love with you, Marco. Really in love. And it destroyed me. He stared at her, wanting to believe it was another lie, another manipulation. But there was something in her voice, something raw and honest. If you loved me, why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you warn me? Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because my family would have killed me. And because I was a coward, I chose my family over you, and I've regretted it every single day since. When you let me go that night, I thought about ending my life. But I didn't, because I felt like I deserved to suffer for what I'd done to you. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything from you. I know you hate me. I know you'll never forgive me. But I'm telling you the truth now, even though it doesn't matter anymore. She wiped her eyes. I loved you. I still love you, even though you've become someone I don't recognize. And if keeping me here, watching me waste away, gives you peace, then fine. I owe you that much. Marco's chest felt tight. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She was supposed to beg, to plead for mercy while remaining defiant. She wasn't supposed to confess love. She wasn't supposed to make him feel something other than rage. Start eating, he said roughly. I won't have your death on my conscience. You've killed dozens of people. What's one more? Those people were soldiers, criminals. They knew the risks. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. I'm what, Marco? Your victim? Your prisoner? What am I to you? I don't know, he admitted. But you're not dying in my house. He left before she could respond, his mind in chaos. This wasn't the revenge he'd planned. This wasn't supposed to hurt, but it did. God, it did. Aria started eating after that conversation, though sparingly. She also started reading the books in her room, exercising in the small space, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in her captivity. Marco found himself visiting her more often than necessary. He told himself he was checking on his prisoner, making sure she was following orders. But the truth was more complicated. Sometimes they'd talk. Small conversations about nothing important. She'd tell him about a book she was reading. He'd mention something that happened in the city. They carefully avoided discussing the past, the betrayal, the 5 years of destruction. Other times, they'd sit in silence, and somehow that was worse. Because in the silence, Marco would remember what it felt like before everything went wrong. He'd remember laughing with her, holding her, believing in something beyond his dark world. One evening, he found her painting. He'd had art supplies delivered to her room after Maria mentioned she'd asked for them. Aria was working on a canvas, her back to the door, completely absorbed in her work. He watched her for a long moment before speaking. I didn't know you still painted, she startled, nearly dropping her brush. I thought you were monitoring me through cameras. You must have seen me paint before. I stopped watching the feeds. He didn't know why he admitted it. She set down her brush and turned to face him. Why? Because it felt invasive. The admission cost him. You're my prisoner, not my entertainment. That's surprisingly decent of you. Don't mistake one moment of conscience for softness. You're still here because I want you to suffer. Am I suffering enough for you? There was no sarcasm in her voice, just genuine curiosity. Has my captivity balanced the scales yet? Marco moved closer to look at her painting. It was a landscape, rolling hills, open sky, freedom captured in brushstrokes. Are you painting what you miss? I'm painting what I'll never have again. She studied her own work. Did you know I was going to leave? That night, the night your father died, I was packing. I was going to disappear, refuse the mission, try to warn you somehow, but I was too late. You expect me to believe that? No, I don't expect you to believe anything I say. She picked up her brush again, adding small details to the sky. But it's true. I realized I couldn't go through with it. That I'd rather lose my family than betray you. But by the time I made that choice, it was already done. If that's true, why did you say you were just doing your job? She was quiet for a long moment. Because I wanted you to hate me. Because if you hated me, it would hurt less when you killed me. And because I was ashamed. I'd made my choice too late, And your father was dead because I'd been weak and cowardly. Marco wanted to call her a liar. Wanted to dismiss everything she was saying as manipulation. But there was something in her voice, in the way she couldn't look at him while she spoke. "Show me," he said suddenly. "Show you what?" "Your phone. Your apartment. When you disappeared that night, where did you go? Show me proof that you were going to leave." She set down the brush and moved to the small desk in the corner, opening the drawer. She pulled out a worn envelope and handed it to him. "Your men took this when they captured me. I asked Maria to bring it to me." Inside was a bus ticket dated 5 years ago, the day after his father died. San Francisco one way, and a letter addressed to him never sent. Marco's hands shook as he unfolded the letter. The handwriting was unmistakably Aria's. "Marco, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I can't do what my family asked of me. I can't betray you. I love you too much. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know that what we had was real for me. Every moment, every word, every touch. I fell in love with the man behind the reputation, and I can't be the reason that man gets hurt. I'm so sorry for everything. Please forget about me and be happy. Love, Aria." He read it 3 times, his mind reeling. The letter was dated the morning of his father's death, written before the assassination, before everything fell apart. "This doesn't prove anything," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You could have written this as insurance, as another layer to your cover." "I could have," she agreed, "but I didn't. I wrote it because I meant every word. And then I never got to send it because your father was killed and suddenly you thought I was responsible. You were part of it. You spent months gathering information for them. I did. And then I fell in love with you and I wanted out. But it was too late. The mission was already in motion and I didn't know the details. I didn't know when or how they planned to strike. I just knew I couldn't be part of it anymore." Marco sank into the chair by her desk, the letter still in his hands. 5 years. 5 years of rage and revenge, of destroying an entire family, of building his empire on hatred and pain, and it might have all been based on a misunderstanding. "Why didn't you tell me this before? When my men brought you in, why didn't you show me this letter?" "Because I didn't think you'd believe me. And because even if you did, your father was still dead. My family still killed him. I was still part of the operation, even if I tried to back out at the end. I deserved your hatred. You destroyed my life. And you destroyed mine. We're both broken, Marco. We've both lost everything. So what now? How long do you keep me here? How long until you feel like the debt is paid?" He didn't have an answer. For 5 years, revenge had been his only purpose. But now, sitting in this room with the woman he'd once loved, holding evidence that maybe she hadn't betrayed him after all, he felt lost. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. It was the first honest thing he'd said to her since he brought her here. That night, Marco couldn't sleep. He kept reading the letter, analyzing every word, trying to find proof it was fake. But his instincts, the ones that had kept him alive in a dangerous world, told him it was real. The next morning, he called in Leo, his most trusted man and the one who'd led the investigation 5 years ago. "The evidence we found connecting Aria to my father's murder. Tell me everything about it." Leo looked uncomfortable. "Boss, we went over this years ago." "Tell me again." Every detail, so Leo did. The bank transfers, the communications, the meeting with Lorenzo Romano. As he talked, Marco listened with fresh ears, and pieces started clicking into place. "The meeting with Lorenzo," Marco interrupted. "When exactly did it happen?" 4 days before the hit. "We have security footage from—" "Send me the footage, now." While he waited, Marco thought about timing. If Aria had written the letter the morning of the assassination, planning to leave, then the meeting 4 days earlier might have been something else entirely. The footage arrived. He watched it 3 times. Lorenzo Romano and Aria in a coffee shop. Aria looked distressed, shaking her head. Lorenzo was leaning forward, speaking intensely. At one point, he grabbed her wrist and she tried to pull away. Marco enhanced the audio, cleaned it up. Their voices were muffled but audible. "Can't do this anymore." "I want out!" Aria's voice panicked. "You're in until the job is done. Your father guaranteed your cooperation." Lorenzo, cold and threatening. "I don't care what he promised. I won't betray Marco. Then your father dies. Your mother dies. Everyone you love dies. Is this man worth your entire family? Silence. Then Aria's broken voice. I hate you. Hate me all you want. But you'll do what you're told. Or I'll kill everyone, starting with your little sister. Marco paused the footage, his hands shaking. Aria had a younger sister, Anna. She'd been only 15 5 years ago. He'd never thought to ask what happened to her. Leo, where is Aria's sister? Aria Romano? Leo's face went pale. She's dead, boss. She died 3 months after your father was killed. Car accident. Was it really an accident? The police said yes, but... Leo shifted uncomfortably. There were some irregularities. The other driver was never found. Marco felt sick. It was me, wasn't it? In my vendetta against the Romanos, I had her killed. Boss, you gave the order to hit all Romano family members. We didn't distinguish between, get out! Boss, get out! When Leo left, Marco sat in the silence of his study, the weight of what he'd done crushing down on him. Aria had tried to protect him, had been threatened into continuing the mission. And when it all fell apart, Marco had responded by killing everyone she loved, including the sister she'd been trying to save. He'd destroyed an innocent girl to punish Aria for a crime she'd tried to prevent. The realization was devastating. For 5 years, he'd been certain of his righteousness, certain that Aria was the villain, and he was justified in his revenge. But the truth was far more complicated. They'd both been victims of the war between their families, and Marco had become the monster he'd always feared he'd become. He went to Aria's room, unlocking the door without knocking. She was sitting on the bed, reading, and looked up in surprise. Your sister, he said without preamble. Anna, tell me about her. Aria's face went white. Why? Tell me. She set down her book with shaking hands. She was my baby sister. Sweet, innocent, wanted to be a veterinarian. She had nothing to do with the family business. Lorenzo used her to control me, threatened to kill her if I didn't go through with the mission. Her voice broke. The last thing I said to her was that I loved her and everything would be okay. 3 months later, she was dead. And I know you had her killed, Marco. So if you've come here to twist the knife, congratulations. You already took the person I loved most in the world. I didn't know, he said hoarsely. When I gave the order to target all Romanos, I didn't know she was innocent. I didn't know you were being coerced. I didn't know any of the truth. Would it have mattered? Yes. The admission cost him everything. If I'd known, I would have protected her. I would have done a lot of things differently. Aria stared at him, and he saw the exact moment she understood what he was saying. You believe me. About the letter, about trying to back out. You actually believe me. I saw the footage of your meeting with Lorenzo. I heard him threaten you, and I've spent all morning realizing that I destroyed your entire family based on incomplete information and my own rage. He moved closer, and for the first time since he'd captured her, he wasn't wearing his armor. He was just a man who'd made terrible mistakes. I killed your sister, Aria, an innocent girl who'd done nothing wrong, and I can never take that back. She started crying, deep sobs that shook her whole body. Marco sat beside her on the bed, and without thinking, pulled her into his arms. She should have pushed him away, should have hated him. But instead, she clung to him and they both broke apart. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. I'm so fucking sorry for what I did to your family. To Anna. To you. You destroyed everything, she sobbed. Everyone's gone. And I helped make it happen by being weak, by not standing up to Lorenzo sooner, by not finding a way to warn you. We both made mistakes. We were both pawns in a war we didn't start. They sat like that for a long time. Two broken people holding on to each other in the wreckage of their destroyed lives. Marco realized this was the closest he'd felt to her in 5 years. And it was happening in the middle of her captivity, in the prison he'd built to torture her. What happens now? She finally asked, pulling back to look at him. I don't know. I brought you here for revenge, but now... He cupped her face gently. Now I don't know what this is anymore. You could let me go. Give me money to start over somewhere else. We could both try to move on. Is that what you want? She looked into his eyes and he saw the truth before she spoke it. No, I want to go back 5 years and do everything differently. I want to save your father and my sister and everyone else who died because of this stupid war. But since I can't do that, I want—" She stopped, shaking her head. "What do you want, Aria?" "I want you. The way it was before everything went wrong. I want to pretend we're still those two people who fell in love despite everything that said we shouldn't." She laughed bitterly. "But that's impossible. You'll never trust me again, and I'll never forgive you for Anna. We're too broken to fix." Marco knew she was right. Logic said he should let her go, move on, try to build a life that wasn't consumed by the past. But when had his heart ever listened to logic? "Maybe we don't need to fix everything," he said slowly. "Maybe we just need to figure out if there's anything left worth saving." After everything we've done to each other? Because of everything we've done to each other, we've both lost everyone else. We're all each other has left from that time when we were happy. He stroked her cheek, remembering how he'd done this exact thing 5 years ago. "I'm not saying I can forgive everything overnight, and I know you hate me for what I've done. But maybe we owe it to the people we used to be to try." "Try what? To be together?" "Marco, you're my captor. You've been keeping me prisoner. Then I'll unlock the door. You can leave right now if you want. I won't stop you." He stood, moving to the door. "But if you stay, it's your choice. Not because you're my prisoner, but because you want to see if there's any chance we can salvage something from this disaster." He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, leaving it open. Leaving the choice to her. For 3 days, the door stayed open. Aria didn't leave, but she didn't venture beyond her rooms either. Marco didn't visit, giving her space to decide what she wanted. On the 4th day, he found her in his study. He'd been going over contracts when he sensed her presence and looked up. She was standing in the doorway, wearing one of the dresses he'd had delivered to her room, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and terrified. "I can't leave," she said quietly. "I've tried. I've walked to the door 100 times. But I can't leave? Because you're afraid I'll hunt you down? No, because despite everything, despite all the pain and death and mistakes, I still love you. And I'm tired of running from that truth." Marco set down his pen slowly. "I killed your family, Aria. I know. And you killed people who deserved it and people who didn't, and I'll hate you for that for the rest of my life. But I'll also love you, because apparently my heart doesn't care about logic." She moved into the room. "You said maybe there's something worth saving. I think you're right. Not the people we were, they're gone. But maybe who we are now, broken and damaged and honest about our scars, maybe that's worth trying for. This won't be easy. Nothing about us has ever been easy." He stood and moved toward her, stopping just close enough that they could touch if either of them reached out. "I don't know if I can be the man I was before, the one who believed in goodness and love and redemption. That man died the night my father did. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for Anna, or if I can forgive myself for my part in all of this. But maybe we don't need to be who we were. Maybe we can be something new, something broken, something honest." She reached out, taking his hand. "No more lies. No more games. Just two people who destroyed each other trying to figure out if they can build something from the rubble." Marco pulled her close, and when he kissed her, it tasted like tears and regret and desperate hope. It wasn't the sweet, innocent love they'd shared 5 years ago. This was darker, more complicated, weighted with all the pain they'd caused each other. When they broke apart, Marco rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to hurt you again. I'm not the same person anymore. I'm colder, harder, more ruthless, I know. And I'm going to resent you for what you've done to my family. Some days I might even hate you. Then why are we doing this? Because the alternative is worse. Being alone, never feeling anything again, letting the past consume us completely." She looked into his eyes. "At least this way, we're choosing to feel something, even if it hurts." They were both right. The weeks that followed were difficult. They'd have moments of connection, genuine happiness, before the past would crash back in. Aria would see something that reminded her of Anna and shut down for days. Marco would have nightmares about his father and wake up angry and distant. But slowly, painfully, they built something new. Not the innocent love they'd had before, but something more complicated. A love that acknowledged the damage they'd done to each other while choosing to move forward anyway. Marco shut down his illegal operations, transitioning the family business to legitimate enterprises. It was his way of honoring the man he'd been when he was with Aria the first time. The man who'd wanted something better. Aria started painting again, not just in her room but in a studio Marco had built for her. She painted their story, the darkness and the light, the love and the violence, the destruction and the slow, painful rebuilding. 3 months after she chose to stay, Marco found her in the garden at sunset. She was sitting on a bench, staring at the roses. "Black roses," she said when he sat beside her. "You sent me one every time you destroyed another piece of my family." "Did you know I kept them?" "All of them. They're in my studio, dried and preserved. A monument to our mutual destruction." "Why would you keep them?" "Because they're honest. They don't pretend that love conquers all, or that forgiveness erases pain. They're a reminder that sometimes love exists alongside hatred. And that's okay. We don't have to choose one or the other." Marco took her hand. "I want to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. I love you, not the version of you I created in my head 5 years ago, but the real you, the complicated, damaged survivor who's still here despite everything. And I'm grateful every day that you chose to stay. Even though I still have days where I hate you, especially because of that. Because it means you're being honest with me." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I know this is unconventional. I know we're doing everything backward. But I want to ask you something." Aria stared at the box, her eyes widening. "Marco, 5 years ago I was going to propose to you. I had a ring picked out and everything. A traditional diamond, something conventional and safe. But that's not us anymore, is it?" He opened the box to reveal a ring with a black diamond surrounded by smaller white ones. Light and dark, perfectly balanced. "Marry me, Aria. Not because I'm holding you captive or because we're trying to recapture the past, but because I choose you, with all your pain and anger and scars. And because I think, maybe, you choose me too." Tears streamed down her face. "You killed my family." "I know. I helped get your father killed." "I know. We've destroyed each other in every way possible." "I know. And yet here we are, still standing, still choosing each other despite all of it." He took the ring from the box. "This isn't a fairy tale proposal, Piccola. This is 2 broken people deciding that being broken together is better than being whole alone. So what do you say?" She looked at the ring, at him, at the garden where black roses grew alongside red ones. Then she held out her hand. "Yes, because you're right. We're too damaged to pretend otherwise. But maybe that's what makes us perfect for each other." He slid the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her, it felt like a promise. Not of perfection or happily ever after, but of honesty and choice and the courage to love despite the damage. The wedding was small and private, held in the garden where Marco had proposed. No family attended. They didn't have family anymore. Just a few trusted friends and staff members who'd watched their complicated journey. Aria wore a dress that was neither fully white nor fully black, but somewhere in between, gray silk that caught the light and changed shade depending on the angle. Marco wore black, as always, but with a white rose in his lapel to match the white flowers Aria carried. They wrote their own vows, and they were nothing like traditional promises. Marco went first. "Aria, I promise to never lie to you again, even when the truth is painful. I promise to honor your anger when you need to hate me for what I've done. I promise to build a life with you that acknowledges our past without being consumed by it. I promise to love you for who you are now, not who I wanted you to be. And I promise that every day I'll choose you, even on the days when it's hard." Aria's voice shook as she spoke. "Marco, I promise to be honest about when I'm struggling with the past. I promise to forgive you a little more each day, even if complete forgiveness never comes. I promise to see the man you're becoming, not just the man you were. I promise to build something new with you from the ashes of what we both destroyed. And I promise that even on the days when I hate what you've done, I'll still love who you are." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, there was no triumphant music or celebration, just a quiet acknowledgement that two people who'd been at war had chosen peace, however complicated and imperfect it might be. The reception was subdued but genuine. Maria cried happy tears. Leo, Marco's most trusted man, pulled Aria aside at one point. "I need to apologize," he said quietly. "5 years ago, I was the one who compiled the evidence against you. I was so focused on finding someone to blame for the boss's father's death that I didn't look deeper. I didn't question the narrative. If I had, maybe none of this would have happened." Aria shook her head. "We all played our parts, Leo. You, me, Marco, our families. We were all caught in a cycle of violence that nobody knew how to stop. But we're stopping it now. That has to count for something." Later that night, in the master bedroom they now shared, Marco and Aria lay in bed talking quietly. It had become their ritual, honesty in the darkness when it was easier to be vulnerable. "Do you think Anna would approve?" Aria asked suddenly. "Of us being together?" Marco thought about it carefully. "I think Anna would want you to be happy, and I think she'd understand that happiness doesn't always look the way we expect it to. I talk to her sometimes. In my head, I tell her about my day, about you, about everything. Is that crazy? No, I talk to my father too. Apologize for the man I became after he died, for letting revenge consume me for so long. Do you think they're watching? Our dead? I don't know. But if they are, I hope they see that we're trying, that we're not letting their deaths define us anymore." Aria turned in his arms to face him. "Some people would say we're wrong for this, that we're dishonoring the dead by being together. Some people haven't lived through what we have. They don't understand that sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to keep living, even when it's hard." He kissed her forehead. "I love you, Mrs. Valentino. I love you too, even though saying it still feels complicated. It should feel complicated. If it was easy, it wouldn't be honest." The months that followed their wedding were a continuation of the pattern they'd established. Good days and bad days, moments of genuine happiness interspersed with grief and anger. But through it all, they maintained their commitment to honesty and choice. Aria started a foundation in Anna's name, providing scholarships for young women who wanted to study veterinary medicine. Marco funded it generously, seeing it as one small way to make amends for his actions. Marco worked with law enforcement to dismantle what remained of the criminal networks in the city, both Valentino and Romano operations. He testified against former associates, burned bridges, and made enemies. But he also made the city safer, and that was its own kind of redemption. They went to therapy, both individually and together. The therapist was initially shocked by their story, but came to understand that healing wasn't always linear or pretty. Sometimes it was messy and complicated and ongoing. One evening, nearly a year after their wedding, Aria was working in her studio when Marco came to find her. She'd been painting all day, and he could see exhaustion and emotion in her face. "Come look," she said, gesturing to the massive canvas she'd been working on for months. It was their story, told in abstract imagery. Dark reds and blacks representing violence and death, bleeding into grays and eventually touches of light. In the center were two figures, neither fully light nor dark, reaching for each other across a landscape of destruction. "It's us," she said softly. "Everything we were, everything we did to each other, everything we're trying to be. I'm calling it Vendetta's Heart." Marco stared at the painting, seeing their entire journey reflected in brushstrokes and color. "It's beautiful and terrible, like us." "Like us," he agreed. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together looking at the visual representation of their complicated love. "Do you regret it? Staying with me?" "Every day," she said honestly. "And every day I choose to stay anyway. That's the difference. Regret and choice can coexist. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that choice. You don't have to be worthy. You just have to be honest. That's all I've ever really wanted from you." They stood in silence for a while, and then Aria said something that had been weighing on her. I want to have children someday.
But I'm terrified. Of what?
Of bringing children into a world where their parents have our history. Of them finding out what we did to each other's families. Of them inheriting our damage. Marco turned her to face him. I'm terrified too. But I also think our children would have something unique. Parents who understand that love isn't perfect, that people make terrible mistakes, and that choosing to keep trying matters more than getting everything right. Do you think we can break the cycle? Give them a different kind of life? Yes, because we already broke the cycle when we chose peace over continued war. When we chose honesty over comfortable lies. Our children won't grow up in the Mafia. They'll grow up with parents who made horrible mistakes but learned from them. I want to believe that. Then believe it. And when you have days where you can't, I'll believe it for both of us. That's what partnership is. Not everyone supported their relationship. Marco's remaining business associates thought he'd gone soft. Some of Aria's distant relatives who'd survived the purge condemned her for sleeping with the enemy. The hardest judgment came from someone Marco had never expected. Isabella, his younger sister who'd been studying abroad during the worst of the violence, came home for a visit 2 years after the wedding. She'd known Marco had married Aria but hadn't understood the full story until she arrived. You married the woman who helped kill our father? Isabella's voice was cold with fury. And you're just, what, playing house? Pretending it never happened? They were in Marco's study, and Aria had excused herself to give them privacy. Marco had known this conversation was coming, but that didn't make it easier. It's more complicated than that, Izzy. How is it complicated? Her family killed Papa. You slaughtered her family in revenge. And now you're married? It's sick, Marco. It's twisted. You're right. It is twisted. But it's also the truth of where we ended up. He told her everything. The coercion, the misunderstandings, the 5 years of revenge, the discovery of how wrong he'd been. I killed innocent people, Izzy. I killed her teenage sister. I'm not the hero of this story. But Papa was a mob boss who built his empire on violence. I loved him, but he wasn't innocent. None of us are. And the cycle of revenge was destroying me. Destroying everyone. Aria and I choosing each other was the only way to end it. Isabella was crying now. I just miss him. And I'm angry that the people responsible aren't being punished. The people responsible are all dead or in prison. What more punishment do you want? Should I kill Aria too? Would that bring him back? No, but then what? Where does the revenge end, Izzy? If I kill Aria, does someone kill me to avenge her? Does someone then kill you to avenge me? When does it stop? His sister collapsed into a chair. I don't know. I just don't know how you can love her after what happened. I don't always know either. Some days it makes perfect sense. Other days it feels impossible. But I choose her anyway, because the alternative is being consumed by hatred forever. And I've already wasted 5 years of my life on hatred. I won't waste the rest. Isabella stayed for a week, watching Marco and Aria together. She saw their complicated dynamic. The love mixed with pain, the good days and the hard days, the honesty about their struggles. On her last night, she joined them for dinner. Aria was quieter than usual, clearly uncomfortable under Isabella's scrutiny. I owe you an apology, Isabella finally said. I came here ready to hate you, to blame you for everything. But watching you both this week, I see that you're not villains. You're just two people who got caught in something bigger than yourselves and are trying to survive it. Aria looked up, surprised. You don't have to apologize. I do. Because I realize something. My brother did terrible things in the name of revenge. If I continue hating you, I'm just perpetuating the same cycle. And maybe the bravest thing any of us can do is choose to stop fighting. It's not easy, Aria said quietly. Some days I wake up and I hate your brother for what he did to my family. Other days I'm grateful he's in my life. The contradiction is exhausting. But you stay anyway. I stay anyway. Isabella reached across the table and took Aria's hand. Then I'll try to understand. For Marco's sake. And maybe, eventually for yours too. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly. But it was a start. And sometimes a start was enough. 3 years after their wedding, Aria found out she was pregnant. The news should have been purely joyful, but instead, It brought up every fear and insecurity they'd been trying to manage. "What if I can't do this?" Aria said, pacing their bedroom at 2 in the morning. "What if I look at our baby and see Anna? What if I resent our child for being alive when she's dead?" Marco pulled her down to sit beside him on the bed. "Then we'll work through it. Together. Just like we work through everything else." "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. It's terrifying. But we've survived worse. We can survive being parents. Can we? Can we really give a child a normal life after everything we've done?" "No," Marco said honestly. "We can't give them a normal life. But we can give them an honest one. We can teach them that people make mistakes, even terrible ones, and that what matters is how you move forward." The pregnancy was difficult, both physically and emotionally. Aria's fears manifested in anxiety attacks and insomnia. Marco, for his part, struggled with his own demons. The fear that he'd fail their child the way he'd failed so many others. But they got through it with therapy, with honesty, with the support system they'd slowly built around themselves. Their daughter was born on a rainy October evening, and they named her Lucia, Light. It was aspirational, Marco said. A hope that she would be the light that came from their darkness. Holding his daughter for the first time, Marco understood a truth he'd been avoiding. The past would always be part of them. The scars would never fully heal, but they could choose, every day, to be better than their worst moments. "She looks like you," Aria said from the hospital bed. Exhausted but smiling. "She has your eyes." "Good. She'll need compassion in her eyes to balance out your intensity." Marco looked at his wife. This woman who'd been his enemy and his salvation, who knew his darkest parts and loved him anyway. "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying. For choosing us. For giving me a reason to be better than I was." Aria reached out and took his hand. "Thank you for letting me stay. For seeing past your anger to the truth. For building this impossible life with me." They sat together, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, and for the first time in years, the weight of the past felt a little lighter. 5 years after Lucia's birth, Aria stood in a cemetery she hadn't visited in a decade. Anna's grave was simple, elegant, exactly what her sister would have wanted. Marco stood beside her, their now 5-year-old daughter playing quietly nearby with the flowers they'd brought. They came here every year on Anna's birthday, a tradition Aria had started as her own form of penance and remembrance. "I brought someone new to meet you today," Aria said to the gravestone, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Her name is Lucia, and she's smart and fierce and everything I wish you could have been. She asks about you sometimes. I tell her you would have been her favorite aunt." Marco placed a hand on Aria's shoulder, offering silent support. Over the years, they'd learned when to speak and when to simply be present. "I'm happy now," Aria continued. "Which feels wrong to say standing here at your grave. How can I be happy when you're gone? When you died because of choices I made and didn't make? But I am. Complicated, messy, imperfect happiness. And I hope you'd want that for me." Lucia ran up, holding a flower. "Mama, can I give this to Aunt Anna?" "Of course, baby." They watched as their daughter placed the flower carefully on the grave, then ran back to play. So innocent, so untouched by the violence that had shaped her parents' lives. "Do you think we've broken the cycle?" Aria asked Marco quietly. "I think we're trying every day, and maybe that's the best we can do." He pulled her close. "She'll know the truth someday. About what we did, what we were, and we'll have to trust that we've given her enough love and stability to understand that people are complicated, that we can love someone and still acknowledge their failures. What if she hates us? Then we'll accept that and love her anyway, just like we've learned to do with each other." They stood in silence for a while longer, paying respects to all the ghosts that had brought them to this moment. Anna, Marco's father, all the people who'd died in the war between their families. Before they left, Marco placed his own flower on the grave. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "For everything. You deserved better than what this world gave you. We all did." As they walked back to the car, Lucia between them holding both their hands, Aria felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The past would always be part of them. The scars would never fully disappear. But they'd built something real from the ruins. Something honest and complicated and worth fighting for. That evening, after putting Lucia to bed, Marco found Aria in her studio. She was working on a new painting, not abstract this time, but representational. A family of 3 standing together, surrounded by shadows but facing toward light. New piece? He asked. A commission. Someone saw Vendetta's heart at a gallery and wants something similar. A piece about redemption and second chances. Are you going to do it? I think so. Because I want people to know that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real, that you can build something beautiful even from broken pieces. Marco wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together looking at the painting. 10 years had passed since that night his father died and everything fell apart. 10 years of pain and revenge and slowly, painfully, healing. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? Aria asked. If my family hadn't killed your father? If we'd just been allowed to love each other without all the complications? Sometimes. But then I think we wouldn't be who we are now. We'd probably be happy, but would we be honest? Would we appreciate what we have? So you're saying you're glad it happened? No, I wish none of it happened. I wish Anna was alive. I wish my father was alive. I wish we hadn't spent years destroying each other. He turned her to face him. But I'm grateful for where we ended up. For the hard lessons we learned. For the love we built that's strong enough to survive our worst moments. Aria kissed him softly. I love you, Marco Valentino. Even after everything. Maybe because of everything. I love you too, Aria. My enemy, my wife, my redemption. Later that night, lying in bed with Marco asleep beside her, Aria thought about their journey. From love to betrayal to revenge to complicated healing. It had been messy and painful, and nothing like the fairy tales she'd imagined as a girl. But it was real. It was honest. And it was theirs. She thought about the letter she'd written 10 years ago, the one she'd planned to send before everything fell apart. The letter that promised she'd love him and disappear, letting him be happy without her. She was glad she'd never sent it. Glad she'd stayed and fought and chosen the hard path of honesty over the easy path of running away. Because the truth was, some love stories weren't about perfect people finding perfect happiness. Some were about broken people choosing each other, over and over, despite every reason not to. And those stories, the complicated ones, the honest ones, the ones that acknowledged the damage while still reaching for hope, those were the stories worth telling. Lucia Valentino stood in her mother's art studio, now a gallery that showcased Aria's work to the public. At 20 years old, she was studying psychology and art therapy, drawn to helping people heal from trauma. Her parents had told her the truth about their history when she turned 16. The whole truth. The betrayal, the revenge, the innocent lives lost, the slow rebuilding. It had been devastating and enlightening in equal measure. She'd been angry at first. Angry at the violence, at the choices they'd made, at the damage they'd caused. She'd spent a year barely speaking to either of them, processing the revelation that her parents were so much more complicated than she'd imagined. But eventually, with therapy and time and watching how they still chose each other every day despite their past, she'd come to understand. Her parents weren't perfect. They'd made terrible mistakes. But they'd also shown her something powerful, that people could change, could grow, could build something beautiful from the worst situations. Now, looking at her mother's most famous painting, Vendetta's Heart, she saw it with new eyes. It wasn't just abstract art. It was a confession, a testimony, a promise that healing was possible even from the deepest wounds. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said beside her. Lucia turned to find her father, older now with gray at his temples, but still carrying himself with the same quiet intensity she'd always known. It's honest, she said. That's what I appreciate about Mom's work. She never pretends that love is simple or that forgiveness erases pain. She just shows that it's possible to coexist with both. Marco studied his daughter, pride evident in his eyes. You've grown into an incredible woman. Stronger than either of us, I think. I learned from the best. And the worst. You and Mom taught me that people are complicated, that mistakes don't define you, and that choosing to keep trying is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. I'm sorry we couldn't give you a simpler story. I don't want a simpler story. I want a true one. And our family's truth is messy and painful and real. I wouldn't trade that for a comfortable lie. They stood together in silence, father and daughter, looking at the visual representation of a love that had survived everything that should have destroyed it. Do you still love her? Lucia asked quietly. Mom, after everything, after all these years, do you still choose her? Every single day, Marco said without hesitation. Some days it's easy, other days it's hard. But every day I wake up and choose her again. And she chooses me. That's what matters. That's what I want someday. Not perfect love, real love, the kind that survives. You'll find it. And when you do, remember what you learned from us. That love isn't about never hurting each other. It's about choosing to stay and heal together even when it would be easier to walk away. Aria joined them, her hair now streaked with silver, but her honey-colored eyes still bright. She slipped her hand into Marco's naturally, a gesture of connection they'd repeated thousands of times over the years. What are we looking at? She asked. Our history, Lucia said, and wondering if it's possible to learn from the past without being trapped by it. That's the work of a lifetime, Aria said. We're still figuring it out ourselves, but I think the answer is yes. You can honor the past, learn from it, and still build a different future. That's what your father and I have been doing for 20 years. And do you think it worked? Did you break the cycle? Marco and Aria looked at each other, a whole conversation happening in that glance. Then they looked at their daughter. Intelligent, compassionate, understanding complexity in a way that would have been impossible without knowing their story. Yes, they said together. We think we did. As Lucia walked through the gallery, her parents stood together in front of Vendetta's heart, still holding hands, still choosing each other despite everything. Their love story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better, a testament to the power of choice, honesty, and the stubborn refusal to let the past destroy the possibility of a future. They'd started as lovers, become enemies, then captives and captors, and finally partners in healing. The journey had been brutal and beautiful in equal measure, but they'd survived it together. And that was worth more than any perfect love story could ever be. Thank you for listening to Vendetta's Heart. If you enjoyed this story of love, revenge, and complicated redemption, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Leave a comment telling me what you thought. Was Marco's revenge justified? Could you forgive someone who destroyed your family? Did Aria and Marco make the right choice? Until next time, remember, sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't about perfect people finding perfect happiness. They're about broken people choosing each other anyway, building something real from the ruins of what was destroyed. Hashtag dark romance. Hashtag mafia romance. Hashtag revenge romance. Hashtag enemies to lovers. Hashtag second chance romance. Hashtag complicated love. This has been Dark Tales. Sleep well and dream of love that survives everything.